There is a story told in the ancient mystery schools of Egypt that few people today have ever heard. They speak of a man who walked into the Great Pyramid of Giza, not as a tourist, not as a scholar, but as someone seeking to die and be reborn. He descended into the deepest chamber where he would lie in a stone sarcophagus for 3 days and 3 nights without food, without water, without any contact with the world above. On the first night, everything he thought he knew about himself began to dissolve. His memories became like distant dreams. His beliefs crumbled like ancient papyrus. His very sense of identity scattered like sand in the desert wind. On the second night, he experienced what the priests called the great emptiness, a void so profound that it felt like falling through the fabric of reality itself. But on the third night, something miraculous happened. From this complete dissolution, from this total destruction of everything he had been, something new began to emerge. A consciousness that was him, but not him. A being that remembered everything but was attached to nothing. A soul that had been purified by the fire of its own extinction. When he emerged from that sacred chamber, the priests would look into his eyes and immediately know whether the ritual had succeeded, because there would be something there that hadn't been there before, something that could only be born through the death of everything that had come before it. Here's what nobody tells you about what you're experiencing right now in your own life. The feeling that you're falling apart, the sense that everything familiar is slipping away, the overwhelming sensation that you're losing yourself completely. You are inside your own personal pyramid chamber, and this feeling isn't the end of your story. It's the beginning of your real story. This is what the Romanian scholar Mircea Eliade spent his entire life trying to help us understand. In his decades of research into the religious traditions of every culture on Earth, he discovered that this experience you're having right now, this sense that your old self is dying, isn't modern, it isn't new, it isn't unique to you. It's one of the most ancient and sacred processes that human consciousness can undergo. What you're experiencing has been recognized, honored, and facilitated by every culture that understood the true nature of human spiritual development. The shamans of Siberia called it the Great Sickness, a period when the future shaman would become so ill that they seemed to be dying, only to emerge from this ordeal with the ability to journey between worlds and heal others. The ancient Greeks had their mystery schools at Eleusis, where initiates would undergo a ritual death so profound that they would never fear actual death again, because they had learned that what they truly were could never die. The Aboriginal peoples of Australia speak of the time of walkabout, when a young person must leave everything familiar behind and wander alone in the wilderness until they discover who they really are beneath all the roles and identities that society had given them. The Tibetan Book of the Dead is actually not about physical death at all, but about this very process of conscious transformation, the death of the ego, and the birth of awakened awareness that you're moving through right now. Every culture knew this secret except ours. Every tradition honored this passage except ours. Every society provided guides and support for this journey except ours. And that's why what you're going through feels so lonely, so confusing, so terrifying. You're undergoing one of the most sacred transformations possible for a human being, but you're doing it without a roadmap, without elders who recognize what's happening to you, without a community that celebrates this death as the prelude to your most authentic life. You know what touches me most when I read your messages? It's realizing that we're not alone in this search. If you're listening to me now and feel that emptiness, that sensation that something important is missing in your life, I want you to know that I understand exactly what you're going through. There were moments when I also felt completely disconnected from the sacred, lost in the midst of a routine that seemed to suck all the magic out of existence. That's why I want to ask you a very direct question. What was the last moment you felt there was something greater than yourself present in your life? It could have been contemplating a sunset, listening to music, or simply in an instant of silence. If you feel comfortable, write in the comments, "I miss the sacred in my daily life," and briefly tell when that last moment was. Your story might be exactly what someone needs to read today to feel less alone in this journey, and I promise I'll read each comment with the care it deserves. When Eliade studied the ancient concept of time, he discovered something that completely revolutionizes how we understand personal transformation. In traditional cultures, time wasn't experienced as a straight line moving from past to future. It was experienced as circular, cyclical, eternal. They understood that every important event happens not just once, but over and over again, in an endless spiral of repetition and renewal. They called this the eternal return, the idea that sacred moments don't just happen and then disappear into the past, but continue to happen, continue to be available, continue to offer their transformative power to anyone who knows how to access them. This is why the death and rebirth you're experiencing doesn't follow the timeline your rational mind expects it to follow. You might think you're making progress, then suddenly find yourself back in the darkness. You might feel like you've emerged from the worst of it, only to discover that another layer of the old self needs to die. You might experience moments of profound clarity and connection, followed by periods of complete confusion and isolation. This isn't because you're doing something wrong or because the process isn't working. This is because sacred time moves in spirals, not straight lines. Each time you return to what seems like the same place, you're actually returning to it at a deeper level, with greater wisdom, with more capacity to let go of what no longer serves you and embrace what wants to be born through you. The ancient Egyptians understood this so deeply that they built their entire civilization around the daily death and rebirth of the sun god Ra. Every sunrise was not just the return of light after darkness, but a cosmic reenactment of the eternal triumph of consciousness over unconsciousness, of life over death, of sacred order over chaos. They knew that by aligning their own lives with this eternal rhythm, by participating consciously in this daily cycle of death and rebirth, they could access the same regenerative power that renewed the cosmos itself. When Eliade studied traditional initiation rituals around the world, he noticed something remarkable. Whether he was looking at the vision quests of Native American tribes, the mystery schools of ancient Greece, the shamanic journeys of Siberian peoples, or the monastic traditions of medieval Christianity, the same basic pattern emerged again and again. First came a period of separation, where the initiate was removed from their ordinary life and familiar surroundings. Then came a time of ordeal, suffering or disorientation, where everything they thought they knew about themselves and the world was stripped away. Finally came the moment of rebirth, where they emerged as a new person with new knowledge, new power, and a new relationship to the sacred dimension of existence. But here's what's crucial to understand about your current experience. You don't need to travel to a mountaintop or join an ancient mystery school to participate in this transformative process. The separation has already happened. You've been pulled away from your old life not by external circumstances, but by an inner force that refuses to let you continue living as you were. The familiar world that once felt solid and permanent now feels foreign and temporary. The people you thought you knew completely now seem like strangers speaking a language you no longer fully understand. The beliefs and assumptions that once guided your decisions now feel hollow and inadequate. This isn't a crisis to be solved. It's a calling to be answered. Your soul is demanding that you step into a larger version of yourself, and it's creating the exact conditions necessary for that transformation to occur. The discomfort you feel isn't punishment, it's preparation. The confusion you experience isn't a sign that you're lost. It's evidence that you're finally ready to be found by your true self. What Eliade discovered in his research was that there are two completely different ways of experiencing reality, two distinct modes of consciousness that create entirely different worlds. He called these the sacred and the profane, but these aren't just different ways of thinking or believing. They're different ways of existing, different ways of perceiving the very fabric of reality itself. When you live in profane consciousness, which is how most modern people live most of the time, everything is what it appears to be and nothing more. A tree is just a collection of cells and chemical processes. A sunset is just light refracting through atmospheric particles. A birth is just a biological event. A death is just the cessation of bodily functions. Time moves in a straight line from past to future. Space is just empty distance between objects. And meaning is something you have to create for yourself, because the universe itself is fundamentally meaningless. But when you live in sacred consciousness, when you experience what Eliade called hierophany, the manifestation of the sacred, everything reveals itself as infinitely more than what it appears to be. That tree becomes an axis mundi, a cosmic pillar connecting earth to heaven. That sunset becomes a daily reenactment of the eternal struggle between light and darkness. That birth becomes a participation in the ongoing creation of the universe itself. That death becomes a sacred passage from one realm of existence to another. Time becomes circular, cyclical, mythical, where the past is not gone but eternally present, where the future is not unknown but inevitable, where every moment contains within it all moments that have ever been and ever will be. This is why the death of your old self feels so disorienting, so otherworldly, so impossible to explain to people who haven't experienced it themselves. You're not just changing your mind about things or developing new preferences or going through a difficult phase. You're transitioning from one mode of consciousness to another, from one way of being human to another, from one reality to another. And this transition requires the complete dismantling of everything that kept you anchored in the old reality, because you can't live in both realities simultaneously. You can't be both your old self and your new self at the same time. One must die completely for the other to be born. Think of the caterpillar in its chrysalis. From the outside, it looks like nothing is happening, or worse, like something is dying. But inside that protective shell, one of the most miraculous transformations in nature is taking place. The caterpillar's entire body dissolves into what scientists call imaginal soup, a formless mass of cells that contains within it the blueprint for something completely different. The caterpillar doesn't just grow wings and learn to fly. It literally ceases to exist as a caterpillar so that a butterfly can be born. This is exactly what's happening to you right now, and it's why you feel so disoriented and unrecognizable to yourself. You're in your own chrysalis phase, and your familiar identity is dissolving into the raw material for your next incarnation. The fear you feel isn't a sign that something is wrong. It's the natural response of the old self as it realizes it's about to be transformed beyond recognition. The emptiness you experience isn't depression. It's the space being created for something new to emerge. The loss of interest in things that used to matter to you isn't a lack of passion. It's your soul clearing away everything that doesn't align with who you're becoming. When Eliade studied the myths and symbols of transformation across different cultures, he discovered that this process of death and rebirth wasn't just a psychological metaphor. It was understood as a literal transformation of consciousness, a fundamental shift in how a person perceives and relates to reality itself. The person who emerged from the initiation didn't just have new knowledge or skills. They had a completely different relationship to the sacred, to mystery, to the invisible forces that shape our lives. They became, in Eliade's terms, homo religiosus, a person who lives in conscious relationship with the sacred dimension of existence rather than being trapped in the purely profane world of everyday concerns and surface meanings. This understanding leads us to one of Eliade's most profound insights about human nature itself. He discovered that there are essentially two types of human beings: homo religiosus, the person who lives in conscious relationship with the sacred dimension of existence, and modern man, who has forgotten that this dimension even exists. Homo religiosus doesn't necessarily mean someone who belongs to a particular religion or follows specific doctrines. It means someone who experiences life as fundamentally meaningful, who sees patterns and connections that others miss, who feels themselves to be part of something larger and more mysterious than their individual existence. This is the person you're being called to become through the death of your old self. Modern man, on the other hand, lives in what Eliade called a desacralized world, where everything has been reduced to its material components, where mystery has been explained away, where the only meaning available is what we create for ourselves through our achievements, relationships, and personal narratives. Modern man suffers from what Eliade identified as the nostalgia for paradise, a deep homesickness for a way of being that feels like a distant memory, but was never actually experienced in this lifetime. This nostalgia isn't just psychological, it's ontological. It's the soul's memory of its true nature, its true home, its true relationship to reality. The death you're experiencing isn't just the death of your personal identity, it's the death of your allegiance to the desacralized world, your unconscious agreement to live as if the material realm is all there is. And this death is necessary because you can't live authentically in both worlds simultaneously. You can't be both asleep and awake, both disconnected and connected, both profane and sacred. If this resonates with you, if you feel like I'm speaking directly to your experience, I want you to do something right now that might feel small, but is actually profound. I want you to give this video a like. Not because you agree with everything I'm saying, but because you're ready to acknowledge that what you're going through deserves to be honored rather than fixed. That like is your way of saying yes to your own transformation, of recognizing that your death and rebirth matter, that your journey toward your authentic self is sacred and worthy of support. It's also a signal to others who might be watching that they're not alone in this experience, that there are others who understand the profound significance of what feels like falling apart, but is actually coming together in a completely new way. The practical application of Eliade's wisdom to your current experience requires a complete shift in how you understand the purpose of your suffering. In the modern world, we're taught that suffering is always a problem to be solved, a symptom to be eliminated, a sign that something has gone wrong and needs to be fixed. But sacred suffering, the kind you're experiencing during this death and rebirth process, serves a completely different function. It's not meant to be eliminated. It's meant to transform you. It's not a sign that something is wrong. It's a sign that something is finally going right. The discomfort you feel isn't punishment for past mistakes or evidence of personal failure. It's the birth pang of your new consciousness, the labor pain of delivering your authentic self into the world. When you understand your suffering in this context, when you recognize it as sacred rather than pathological, everything changes. You stop trying to escape from it and start learning to work with it. You stop seeing it as an enemy and start recognizing it as an ally. You stop asking, "How can I make this stop?" and start asking, "What is this trying to teach me? What is this trying to show me about who I really am? What wants to be born through this experience?" This shift in relationship to your suffering is the beginning of your initiation into sacred consciousness, your transformation from modern man into homo religiosus. The traditional cultures that Eliade studied understood something profound about the nature of time that we've completely forgotten in our modern world. They recognized that life moves in cycles, not straight lines. They knew that growth happens in spirals, not through steady progress. They understood that there are seasons of the soul just as there are seasons in nature, and that the winter of the spirit, when everything appears dead and barren, is actually the most fertile time for new growth to begin beneath the surface. When you're in the midst of this inner winter, when your old self is dying and nothing new has emerged yet to take its place, it's easy to feel like you're going backward, or that you've lost your way completely. But what's actually happening is that you're participating in sacred time, in what Eliade called the time of origins, when the fundamental patterns of reality become fluid and open to transformation. This isn't chronological time, where one moment follows another in predictable sequence. This is mythical time, when the impossible becomes possible, when the laws that govern ordinary existence are temporarily suspended, when miracles are not only possible but inevitable. The disorientation you feel during this period isn't a bug in the system. It's a feature. It's your consciousness adapting to operating in a different dimension of time, where healing and transformation can happen instantaneously, where years of patterns can dissolve in a moment, where completely new ways of being can emerge without warning. But to access this sacred time, you have to let go of your attachment to linear progress and predictable outcomes. You have to surrender to a process that unfolds according to its own mysterious logic, not according to your timeline or your understanding of how change should happen. If this resonates with you, if you feel like I'm speaking directly to your experience, I want you to do something right now that might feel small but is actually profound. I want you to give this video a like, not because you agree with everything I'm saying, but because you're ready to acknowledge that what you're going through deserves to be honored rather than fixed. That like is your way of saying yes to your own transformation, of recognizing that your death and rebirth matter, that your journey toward your authentic self is sacred and worthy of support. It's also a signal to others who might be watching that they're not alone in this experience, that there are others who understand the profound significance of what feels like falling apart, but is actually coming together in a completely new way. The rebirth that emerges from this death doesn't happen according to your timeline or your expectations. It happens according to sacred time, mythical time, the time of eternal return where endings and beginnings are not separate events, but aspects of a single, continuous transformation. One morning you'll wake up and notice that the world looks different, not because anything external has changed, but because the eyes you're seeing through have been completely renewed. You'll find yourself responding to situations in ways that surprise you with their wisdom and spontaneity. You'll discover that problems that once seemed insurmountable have simply dissolved, not because you solved them, but because you've become the kind of person for whom those problems no longer exist. You'll notice that you're naturally drawn to experiences, people, and opportunities that align with your deepest values and highest potential. This isn't wishful thinking or spiritual bypassing. This is the natural result of allowing the ancient process of death and rebirth to complete itself without interference from your rational mind's need to understand and control everything. When you stop trying to manage your transformation and start participating in it, when you stop treating your spiritual death as a medical condition and start honoring it as a sacred passage, you align yourself with the same cosmic forces that govern the renewal of all life. You become a conscious participant in the eternal cycle of destruction and creation that keeps the universe itself alive and evolving. But perhaps the most beautiful aspect of this transformation is that once you've experienced your own death and rebirth, once you've discovered that what you truly are cannot be destroyed by any circumstances or challenges, you become a source of hope and guidance for others who are going through their own dark nights of the soul. You become what Eliade would call a bridge between worlds, someone who can help others recognize the sacred dimension of their own suffering, their own confusion, their own sense that everything familiar is falling apart. You become living proof that human beings are capable of profound transformation, that we don't have to remain trapped in patterns that no longer serve us, that there is always the possibility of dying to what we were and being born into what we're meant to become. This is not just personal healing. This is cultural healing. This is not just individual awakening. This is collective awakening. Every person who successfully navigates this passage from unconscious living to sacred consciousness contributes to the healing of our entire civilization's relationship with the mysterious, the meaningful, the divine. If you've made it this far, it's because something inside you recognizes that there's a different path, a deeper way to understand your own spiritual journey. I know what it's like to feel lost amid so much noise of the modern world, seeking answers that always seem to slip through your fingers. That's why I created this space, this refuge where we can explore together the ancient wisdom that still pulses alive in our hearts. When you subscribe to this channel, you're not just clicking a button, you're joining a community of people who, like you, feel that life has deeper layers waiting to be discovered. Here you'll find not just knowledge, but genuine embrace for your thirst for meaning. Subscribe now and be part of this journey of rediscovering the sacred in everyday life. Your soul deserves this gift. The death you're experiencing isn't the end of your story. It's the beginning of your real story. The story that was always meant to be told through your unique life, your particular gifts, your specific way of being a bridge between the human and the divine. Trust the process, even when it feels impossible. Honor the dissolution, even when it terrifies you. Welcome the unknown, even when every part of you wants to retreat to the familiar. You are not falling apart. You are falling into place. You are not losing yourself. You are finding yourself. You are not dying. You are finally being born.